You're listening to episode 7 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Greta Christina joins us for part 2 of our conversation about mindfulness practice. Today the tables turn, and Greta will ask some questions of her own. Greta Christina has been writing professionally since 1989 on topics including atheism, sexuality and sex positivity, LGBT issues, politics, culture, and whatever crosses her mind. She has been a public speaker for many years and is on the speakers bureaus of the Secular Student Alliance. Her writing has appeared in multiple magazines and newspapers, including Ms., Penthouse, Chicago Sun-Times, On Our Backs, and Skeptical Inquirer, and numerous anthologies. She lives in San Francisco with her wife, Ingrid.
Well, that actually brings up a question that I had for you, which is a number of people, since I've been writing about this practice, a number of people have been saying, this sounds interesting. It's like people either who have done this in the past and let it go, or who have just never done it and are curious about it, are saying, what resources are there? And usually I'll try to direct them to a MBSR, class that's being taught. But that's not available for everybody, either because they can't afford it or it's just not in their city. And they want to know, it's like, are there books, are there videos, are there tapes, and so on? And on the one hand, it's like I want to be able to direct people to resources, and it's like if you can't take a course, then I want to direct people to resources. At the same time, I feel like that this is powerful. You're altering your consciousness. You're doing physical and mental practices that alter your consciousness, and I'm a little reluctant to direct people to just do this on their own without any guidance at all.
Totally agree. Yes.
And so that's my question is, can somebody, assuming that they're not suffering from clinical depression or anxieties, that they don't have any specific mental health problems, can you just pick up a book, pick up a tape, pick up a YouTube video and start meditating?
The answer is, of course, nothing is stopping you. Of course, you can. The thing that I do recommend, and this is sometimes a little surprising to people, is that the guidance of a teacher and developing a positive relationship with a teacher that you trust and a community to help support the practice, to hear from others who are also doing this, who may run into snags in what they're doing, and it's always nice to get a little reassurance, or just people to meditate with, to have a regularly scheduled time where you go to a particular place or meet some people online, whatever it is, to help make sure that you get the support you need to do this practice ongoing. So there are a few different kinds of resources, in particular things like there's a book, and I will have it on the episode page for this episode, and we also have it in the resources section on this site, a book called The Mindful Way Through Depression. And again, this is not the book you get if you are going through a clinical depression and the only thing you need to do is read this and you're done. That's not it at all. I recommend this book for 2 reasons. First, it is very good in terms of the science about what's happening in the brain in depression and helping one learn to recognize the signs of that and deal with depression as it arises. We're talking normal or situational kinds of depression before they get out of hand. That being said, it's also an excellent book just on mindfulness practice on its own. The exercises that are in there are a terrific way for you to have a reference of different things you can try while you're doing a little bit of this on your own. Now, I do recommend that people, as much as they can, find a program, as Greta has done, and go through that if you're able to. There's not just MBSR, there are other programs as well. And check into centers. Typically, they'll be listed as meditation centers or mindfulness centers or insight centers. Don't be too scared or concerned by the word vipassana. It just means insight. And the practices they do are the ones that Greta and I have been talking about today. They are body scans, mindfulness of breath, gentle yoga, things like that are the kinds of activities that occur. Some locations will be much more pragmatic about what the practice is and what your experience is as a human being. Others may have some trappings that are ideologically based that may not work for you, but you need to try them and see and judge for yourself what your own particular comfort zone, if that's even there, and what those are. I'd also recommend that if people are having particular difficulties that they need to deal with, like depression and anxiety, you can do online searches to find therapists that have mindfulness as part of their treatment modality, not exclusively, but part of it, so that you can also have that, again, as something you can take in your own hands and do yourself, as Greta was just describing a particular experience that she had on a plane, rather than always having to rely on the ongoing medication. I do get a little concerned sometimes when I hear people who do have an issue saying, I'm going to stop my medication cold, and they don't talk to their doctor, they don't talk to the therapist, they've just decided to do this because they started meditating. I don't recommend that. I find that very concerning, and it may work for you. I'm not saying it can't, and I'm not saying that there isn't the possibility of being off medication, but you need to do that with the guidance of not only the therapist that is helping you with this and is probably doing the prescriptions for you, but also have the help of a teacher and someone who's going to have an understanding of what your particular situation is. The important thing here is that support for an ongoing practice when you're not suffering from particular issues. There are lots of resources around. We will have many online resources, and those are growing more and more each day. We'll have a number of them on this site. They're really good books for you to read, and practice groups that are sprouting up online. And we'll have those linked on this episode page, and of course, they're on this site as well.
Well, that actually leads me to something else that I wanted to talk with you about, which is, so I took this 8-week course, that's offered through my healthcare provider. And the 8-week course was awesome. And at the end of the course, the teacher says, well, here are some resources for ongoing practice, it's like, meditation groups that you can participate on, et cetera. And they were all religiously based. They were all Buddhist. And the teacher even said, I get this. These are all Buddhists, but this is what there is. And he wasn't like that he was like being dogmatic or anything. He was just saying, look, this is what there is. And that was somewhat frustrating for me because I would like to, work with a teacher in an ongoing way. I would like to work with a group in an ongoing way. And yet, at least, where I live, and this surprises me, I live in the Bay Area. You would think this would be, but unfortunately, the Bay Area is lousy. I was going to say you'd think it would be lousy with, this sort of secular meditation, but what it's lousy with is New Age meditation and, spiritual, supernatural based meditation. And I know that there are some people for whom that's fine. I have friends who are atheists and non-believers who are fine with that. They can filter out the supernatural stuff. They can recast it in their own way, and it really works for them. I have a very hard time with that, and I don't think that would work for me, because I'm a professional atheist. It's like my life's work to religion being a bad idea. It's like, I think it would be very hard for me to be in any kind of spiritual based practice and not just be irritated to the point of impossible distraction. But that does sort of lead to this question, what options are there for ongoing support? And do you think that online groups, is that effective?
So a couple of very good points about the question. First is, why do we have so few secular kind of centers, ones that are more based on the science and the human experience rather than coming from a tradition of Buddhism or New Agey kinds of stuff. And I think part of that is due to the number of decades that Buddhism has had in the country and the proliferation of centers that are based on people getting a transmission in a particular religious lineage. And I'd like to state that many of the teachers in those traditions are the best teachers I've ever had in meditation. So I do want to say that there are very good ones out there. There are also those who may not be so good. There are some that have perhaps received what would be called a Dharma transmission, who may not have quite the versatility with group dynamics or the science behind it, which is one of the things that this podcast and the efforts of groups like the Center for Mindfulness and several other new programs that are only just starting are trying to promote this kind of practice that's really based on what's the human experience here? What's the science behind it? And that validation. And so it's so early on, we don't see the same kind of proliferation of mindfulness practice centers that we do in Buddhist Dharma centers. I think that's going to change. I think some of the requirements we would like to see around credentialing of meditation teachers, of mindfulness teachers, and how they run their communities is going to make it a little slower than we might see in other traditional communities that may not have quite as much of an interest in those kinds of standards. But it's going to happen little by little, and we're seeing that already as programs develop. In the meantime, you had also brought up the question about, are the programs that are offered online in those communities, are those effective? There is a study that recently came out, and this is linked in David Black's wonderful monthly journal where he collects the studies in peer-reviewed journals about this, from a nurse, Dawn Bazarko, was the lead author on it, that did a mindfulness intervention that was telephonic delivery. And so people would call in and have those regular practices. And there was really no difference in the group that had the in-person intervention versus the group that had the telephonic intervention. So there is some interesting work on that, and for folks who are interested, I will link to that study on this episode, and the full study is available. It's not just the abstract, it's the full study that's available there. And in my own experience in a group that, full disclosure, this is run by a friend of mine, Mark Nickelbein, is using our Adobe Connect, and we have little video blocks. And I'm always very happy when we break outside of the Brady Bunch Hollywood Square shape and we get more people than the traditional 9. And you get to see the people that you're sitting with. And Mark does a guided meditation, and we break out into dyads, and we have particular exercises and things that we do there, which is very much like what we see in MBSR programs, for example. And of course, other mindfulness programs do this kind of activity as well. And I have to say, I was away for a few weeks from this program at the scientific conference that the Center for Mindfulness puts on every year. So I missed it. And then I came in a couple weeks later. And by this point, I'd been away for a month, because it's only once every other week at this point. And I really have a hard time describing how surprised I was that as I signed in and the faces started popping up in our community of around 16 people who show up on a regular basis, how very encouraging and heartwarming that was for me, that we were developing a community and that we were developing really fairly deep interpersonal communications, that being away from people that I work with in my day job, for example, I wouldn't necessarily have quite that impassioned a response. And part of it is the nature of what it is that we're doing, and that we are doing a very difficult and very personal practice sometimes. And we're sharing things that are so intimate to our lives and to each other. I shouldn't be surprised, and yet I was. So just from a personal story, I would say that, yes, there is some value in that. And of course, as I mentioned, I will be posting a link to that study, and I expect more will be coming as we see a growing interest in capitalizing on social networking and digital technology to make those kinds of connections and provide that kind of support.
Well, that's really good to hear, because that actually honestly had not even occurred to me, that online support communities for this and online guidance and online teaching hadn't even occurred to me, that was even an option. And I was sort of like, well, I guess I'm just on my own now. There'll be books and friends I can talk to or whatever. But that's actually really that's really reassuring. That's really good to know.
And more programs will be coming out from various groups I know are encouraging this ongoing, at the very least, dialogues. We're seeing an increase in discussion forums and things like that out there in the wild, and practice groups that get together either telephonically or with video or things like that. So folks who are listening, you're not alone, especially as you're experiencing what Greta has shared, that you take the program and you don't have a lot of options that necessarily resonate for you. More and more are coming up. Be patient. Try the other centers as well. And I know for many of us, it's not going to work so well. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to stay. You don't. Try a few different places. And if you're either geographically isolated, which many folks are, or there are lots of centers, but you're ideologically isolated, shall we say, there are online options for you as well.
Well, something I would hope what we would see happening is that local non-believer communities, local atheists, humanists, etc., communities might start trying to be centers for this as well. Because there's atheist communities cropping up in pretty much every major city in the U.S. at this point. And I know that there's a couple of them. I know the Humanist Chaplaincy at Harvard has a weekly meditation class.
Yes, our good friend Rick Heller is part of that, and they have a regular program. And I know a lot of Unitarian Universalist groups also do it, and lots of secular humanist groups have active meditation groups that get together. So that's also something to check. Meetup, for example. Go to meetup.com and do a search and see what pops up.
That's a great idea.
Today's quote is from John Kabat-Zinn's book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. Non-doing has nothing to do with being indolent or passive. Quite the contrary. It takes great courage and energy to cultivate non-doing, both in stillness and in activity. Nor is it easy to make a special time for non-doing and keep at it in the face of everything in our lives which needs to be done. But non-doing doesn't have to be threatening to people who feel they always have to get things done. They might find they get even more done, and done better, by practicing non-doing. Non-doing simply means letting things be and allowing them to unfold in their own way. Enormous effort can be involved, but it is a graceful, knowledgeable, effortless effort, a doerless doing, cultivated over a lifetime. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.